Welcome, Bill. This is Bill Freitag with us today, the CEO and founder of Wikifri, an interesting consulting firm specialized in the vertical of insurance. Bill, your career journey is truly impressive from founding Agile Technologies and its successful acquisition by Majesco to now leading Wikifri. So could you please start by sharing what initially drew you to the insurance industry and what was the pivotal moment, I would say, that led you to create Wikifree?
And so I would answer, like, you want me to answer that right now?
Yes, please. Yes, that would be wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll give you the short version. I don't know that anybody thinks that they're going to get into insurance. I mean, there are some advanced degrees now or degrees for those programs, but when I graduated college, I was a math major.
Yes.
Went into system engineering, but finally wound up in insurance, and I was able to do a lot of interesting things and make impacts early on in the industry.
Hmm.
Um, I would go, if depending on how we think the content should run, I'd talk about working with Progressive Insurance, talk about Crum& Foster, with just how things came along. But I think most of the people I talk to is they happened into insurance. It wasn't like I set out and said I'm going to go into insurance, but then I found it to be a very fascinating and rewarding, industry.
Sure, of course. Lots of people do choose insurance because of residual incomes and because of the science behind it, the statistics, and the complexity, of course, of matching programs, policies with people's situations, company situations. So, and you can shape reality, right? So those programs, we really do. So, so just briefly, so Wikifree's mission to connect insurtechs, insurance companies, and investment groups for innovation is quite interesting. So what was the core problem that you observed in the market that Wikifree was specifically designed to solve through this connection that you made looking at the market?
Well, in insurance, property and casualty insurance is, very dynamic right now. There's capital coming into the field. There's capital allocation that people are looking at.
Yeah.
And that comes in through investment groups, through standard insurance companies, through reinsurance companies. And we saw a need for people who knew and understood the business of insurance and knew the technology that supported those.
Hmm.
And each one of the constituency groups that we work with, stakeholders, whether it's a private equity company, an insurance company buying another one, we
Hmm.
start with being able to look at their business strategy, look at their operating model, look at, is this something I want to have as part of my portfolio, or do I want to run my company better? We can help analyze and look at all of those things. We not only have the capabilities to do that type of analysis, but we also have the capability to implement any of our roadmaps and recommendations. So there's a big difference to being a hands-on practitioner versus somebody who's dealing in the theory. So we can deal with, like, strategically what do you do, but then we can go out and implement that. We hold a lot of industry relationships with people for technology, for distribution, for people who are operating in the space. And so we really look at, we want to take our connections and help other people and add value through those.
Hmm. Hmm. Sure. So from your vantage point today, what are the most significant trends that are shaping the M&A landscape for private insurance firms and equity and for equity investors today? And maybe are there specific sectors of or types of firms that are particularly active or facing unique challenges where you end up working more?
Well, we work, I mean, it's a large space and a large industry. So
Yeah.
there's not everyone's doing the same thing at the same time, although there are trends and there is momentum in certain areas.
Hmm.
Certainly in the distribution space, we still see people founding new MGAs, creating new MGAs, selling MGAs, acquiring MGAs. That's going to be part of the landscape for some time,
Hmm.
which creates opportunities for people in the market and creates opportunities for firms like ours.
Hmm.
There's also, a large question out there I think, in society, which is what's going on with AI
Hmm.
and how does that apply to insurance? And I would say this is an area where we've seen and are participating with a fair of the momentum is around creating underwriting workbenches. So we
Yeah.
help people define what does that mean to them,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is important because it's something that there are some industry standards, but there's also things of like, how do you want to service the customer? How do you want to be responsive? Do you need to be responsive? Do you need more information? How do you get that information without asking for it? Those
Mm-hmm.
are all types of things that go in, and then saying, how do I use this new digital technology to have the right workflow and process for my organization so
Mm-hmm.
that we're both efficient and effective?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you've been around in this industry, as you said, for a while, yeah, for decades. So what's fundamentally different about navigating M&A now compared to, say, 10, 15 years ago from your observations?
Well, 10 to 15 years ago, there was a lot less M&A.
Mm-hmm.
It was people were not attracted to the insurance carrier side of it.
Mm-hmm.
You see now people are looking at their market share, they are looking at their distribution, they are looking at reshaping their companies. And I think that's just because of capital availability, but
Mm-hmm.
also people knowing and understanding, how to manage their risk, having more data available about
For sure.
their portfolio, having more data around what risks they've taken on. I
Mm-hmm.
think all of those things, and now there's more modeling available so you can manage your balance sheet more effectively. So it gives you the capability to scale if you have that wherewithal.
Mm-hmm.
I think also in the M&A space, on the distribution side, people used to, I think there's just been a mindset shift there. Before it was, I have a agent, I have a broker, I have a wholesaler, maybe I have an MGA, I'm distributing my product through that. Now people are fundamentally looking at how do I want to react and relate to the distribution channels. Do I want to own those channels? Do I
Mm-hmm.
want to distribute independently through those channels?
Sure.
I think there's a lot going on there. And then with the interest from private equity, there's owning distribution is very bankable, and it's very attractive to the capital communities.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was more of an awakening than it was anything else. People started looking at it differently than just
Mm-hmm.
underwriting teams, but now
Mm-hmm.
looking at it is how do I control the distribution channel?
Yeah. Vertical integration. Yes. I mean, of course, that gives you a big handle and you can launch new products, etc. So of course you emphasize innovation, right, to the insurance industry. That's what you bring. So where do you see the biggest gaps today in innovation currently, and how are traditional insurance companies adapting? I mean, you said vertical, integration, so or struggling to adapt, to the rapid pace of change that insurtech drive in the industry. Biggest gap from an innovation perspective.
I mean, to me, is how does an insurance company manage and absorb innovation? I think that that's the greatest challenge.
Hmm.
I mean, technologies come and go, but understanding what that means to the process, understanding what that means to data capture. Because to me, the biggest gap in the industry overall is people talk to and say data is really important to me, but they don't back that up with investment and they don't back that up with their actions. So what
Mm,
you do is you certainly in the distribution space, you wind up having, they don't capture the right data at the right time. They don't have the data available to pass on to the insurance value chain, meaning MJs don't necessarily have the information that carriers want. And so what that does is it degrades your ability to analyze and understand your book of business.
mm,
So you don't have the ability to look around corners because you don't have the data to look around corners.
mm. So okay, that's my next question. So what's one common misconception traditional insurers have about integrating with insurtech, and how does Wikifree help bridge that gap? So you just said data integration, and understanding. So how do you bridge that gap for insurers?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is understanding the use cases for the data as it goes
Hmm.
through the value chain. So
Hmm.
there's different data that's needed when you're submitting a risk uh, for evaluation, and
Hmm.
and what you need, because you could say, okay, I do some things for a quick quote and indication pricing, but then I might have subjectivities, other things I want to evaluate further. and
Mm-hmm.
understanding I may not have everything day one, so I can't stop the process day one. I may have the information day two, but knowing what data you need to have when and who's going to be using it for what purpose then allows you to manage what technologies are going to apply and how you're going to utilize those technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if it's an unthought of technology or something that's thought of today, but there's things like with AI, where is it applicable? Where is it not applicable today? Where is it going to be applicable in the future? Because it's going to mature and it's going to have more capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still things where there's questions in the market out there. How do I show a regulator the process I went through to come up with a quote, to come up with a price?
Mm-hmm.
Those regulatory questions aren't going away. You still have to be able to answer those. And so we have the expertise to know the entire ecosystem and know how those different bits fit in and
Mm-hmm.
what data you need to capture and why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I feel like your answers always lead to the question. Okay, so let's dive deeper. So you've successfully turned around this underperforming IT services, companies, and significantly increased satisfaction metrics in past roles. So we're back to metrics. What's the biggest operational or technological bottleneck that you frequently encounter when working with insurance firms, when preparing for an acquisition or seeking significant growth?
Well, I think that there's many different types of situations people can find themselves in. The two biggest extremes right now is I'm a older, successful insurance company. I have a lot of legacy in my process. I have a lot of legacy in my technology. And now how am I going to get that to compete in the modern world?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And how, and that's not just from is my technology new shiny? It's, is my technology productive from a data standpoint?
mm-hmm,
Because I
mm-hmm,
think people giving lip service to data collection and data quality is one thing, but it's not inexpensive to deal with it,
mm-hmm,
especially when you're in a legacy company. I think it's an interesting juxtaposition when you look at a startup, because in a startup, they don't have legacy, yet they're just creating their legacy.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so sometimes they may have a constrained budget. So they may choose to do less, not more. And then they're going to build more as they go. And then understanding that data capture and how that data is going to live and what you're going to be able to do with that. If you don't capture it today, there's going to be some latency to when you can use that data in the future.
mm-hmm,
And so helping people get premium on the books is always job number one. But
mm-hmm,
then understanding how I'm going to manage that premium that I put on the books and how I'm going to get to the profitability of that is where the margin is in insurance.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that. Even in the largest organization today, big data, is still not given as much intention because it's very often designed by corporate functions, that are far away from action. And there's sometimes a disconnect. That's what I've seen at clients, not in the insurance industry, but in other industries. And when data is actually your lever to accelerate, your actions on the market to respond to competition or to respond to, like COVID, for instance, there were like huge changes and the ability of organizations to respond with new solutions, were slowed down because of processes and systems not being really up to par to influence their market. Okay, so influence their actions. So let's change to strategic guidance and overcoming the complexity of those markets. So Wikifri positions itself as a result-driven firm, right? Offering strategic guidance without bias. So would you back up those words? They come from your website, so and our conversation. So in a complex industry like insurance, what does result-driven truly mean for your clients, and how do you ensure that strategic advice translates into measurable business outcomes?
Well, based on the current climate, I mean, it's easy for our startup clients, it's easy. We've gotten many companies up and running in processing business in 90 days. So the outcome is I need to be able to process this business to go to market so I can meet my investor demands, meet the market demands. We help them evaluate very quickly what's the operating model, what's the technology, and it's got to get implemented.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So
And it
yeah.
becomes a little more it gets more complicated if you're dealing with some of the larger legacy companies, but typically people are saying is, I want to enter this line of business, or I want to make sure that I'm running this process more efficiently. So if I'm looking at a compliance processes, have I streamlined the process? How has I streamlined that?
Hmm.
Would all be benefits that they would get. So I know I have better management over my compliance. I have better process for efficiency, and I've discharged one of my corporate obligations.
Hmm. Could you share with me an example and with our audience an example of a common strategic misstep you see insurance firms make and how Wikifree is able to course correct?
Well, I think one of the things is we don't look at it as how does the all apply to the individual. We look at individually, where's a company at, and then what are the right tools to be using to help them.
Hmm.
And so I don't know that we say something's common, but right now we talked about people commonly working on the underwriting workbench. So they're saying is, what questions do I need to ask? What data do I need? What questions do I need to answer? Who needs to answer those? Can I get that data from alternative sources so that I can streamline and create a better customer experience to get more quotes out the door faster?
Mm.
So we're using AI to do that. We're using data to do that. We're using core systems to do that.
Very fascinating. I'm thinking about for the past few minutes. I'm thinking about a large firm that I know that has very ambitious acquisition goals. To keep afloat, and we'll talk about that after the podcast if you're interested. So now let's talk about the future of Wikifree and looking ahead. What's the next level for Wikifree? What are your key growth levers? What are the challenges that you focused on overcoming to achieve your vision?
Well, right now I think we're in a good place. We're looking at our structure for how do we continue to scale as a business. We've been successful up until this point, and so now we're putting the infrastructure in place to be able to scale both our consulting practice, our system integration practice, and our data product.
Hmm.
And I think where we're looking at is how do we stay uh, current, relevant, and one of the change agents in the insurance business. And so we're going to see that by, we're continuing to invest in our AI skills, but we're continuing to go out and recruit and hire people who are knowledgeable of these things and have that experience. But
Hmm.
do I see that each one of these lines of business for us are going to be able to, continue our growth, as we begin to move forward, and we're going to do that by adding more value to our clients.
Could you maybe share one specific area in AI, for instance, that you're actively seeking to innovate or enhance your portfolio of skills and capabilities to better serve your clients?
Um, well, we're doing the underwriting workbenches, which we talked about, and working on collection, data select in risk selection. But in terms of our data platform, Insurance Data Cloud, we're already taking advantage of large language models to change the analytics, so people can be more prompt driven in their analytical questions versus dashboard driven. So
Mm.
we see that both are going to play an increasingly vital role. As you work that, some people are going to want to prefer to work in a dashboard environment. Some people are going to want to prefer to work in a prompted environment, or maybe they want both, and it just depends on the particular use case.
Hmm.
But right now, our focus on AI is going to be on that AI and analytics.
Hmm. One last question. You speak about data, obviously, very well, and you act on data very pointedly. It sounds like you're talking about quantitative data, right? So the world of acquisition, as we know, I started my career in this, actually M&A. What about qualitative data when it comes to evaluate the success of an organization to merge with another one?
Um, I mean, I think there's multiple factors to look at. So one is understanding the operating model of each. Some of it is looking at the purpose of the acquisition, because some of them are fold-ins, some of them are I'm just buying the business, and I may not need systems or the processes from the existing targets. We're looking at what data is available. And some of it could be because it's going to be, a bolt-on add-on growth, or it could be turn into the platform.
Hmm.
So depending on what those are, we would look at that and say, how do I get the most cost-effective operating platform with both the process and the technology? And then how do I harness the data that I need? So we're going to focus in each one of those different areas and have separate views, metrics. Some of that will be cost driven, some of that will be customer service driven. Um, but those will be the things that we would look at, as we go forward.
Not so much the people and culture side, do you?
People and culture is always part of things.
How do
Um,
you take it
it,
in though with
to me,
data?
that's kind of like a given. I guess most people don't look at it, but we view you have to take into account change management. You got to take into account, how people are going to react to this, because you don't get change without explaining to people what's in it for them.
Hmm. Do you have a
And
model,
that
a
they
framework?
could be resistors otherwise.
Do you know any framework that you think is more effective than others?
We have our own proprietary network that follows some of the more general qualifications and standards.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, Bill, it's been incredibly insightful. You have a very solid, strong, structured way, to analyze problems and more importantly, solve them. So I cannot be more grateful, to thank you for coming. I hope we'll keep looking at your evolution at Wikifree and the great realizations that you have. And then I'd love to keep up with the conversation and share some contacts that I think you'll find interesting, yeah, for your portfolio of activities. Thank you. Until soon, and this is the end of our podcast. Until soon. Bye bye.